Welcome to the Epcot International Festival of the Arts. Our next presentation is Seeing Sounds and Painting Music. Get ready to be inspired by a visual artist who translates the music she hears into a visual form. It's literally the beauty of sound. Please welcome the seminar presenter, Christina Eve.
Hi, everybody. It's morning. It's great to be here today with you guys. As I was introduced, I'm Christina Eve. I'm a musician and a visual artist, and I was invited to come speak with you guys today about the particular perspective that I bring to my artwork, which is influenced by a neurological condition I have called synesthesia. Have you guys heard of synesthesia? Anybody? Yeah. So in the general population, there are a few people who have heard of it, but for the most part, people have not. So I'm excited to come educate you a little bit about what synesthesia is. We're going to take some time to talk about the physiology behind it. We'll also get to look at some of my artwork that I'll share with you, and some other fun stuff. So, like I said, synesthesia is a neurological condition. So I want to take a step back and talk about something that we're all familiar with. That's the five senses. Obviously, we can see the shapes and colors around us. We can hear the sounds and the music. And we taste with two senses, smell and taste, obviously. But do we all interpret sensory information the same way? No, we don't. If we have friends of ours that are hearing impaired or blind, obviously they're going to interpret sensory information differently than we do. So we'll talk about some differences that we have in sensory perception here. Oops, I'm going backwards, I think. There we go. Has anybody heard of super tasters? Super tasters are people who have more taste buds on their tongue than the normal population. And some of these taste buds can detect certain molecules that we can't. And so broccoli is one of those foods that super tasters can taste that certain molecule, and it's really a displeasing taste to them. So if you have somebody in your life that really hates broccoli, it might be that they're picky, or it might be that they're a super taster, that they have taste buds that can sense those things that we can't. We've all heard of color blindness. This is when photoreceptors in the eye fail to respond to certain wavelengths of light. And so when we experience color blindness, obviously that's a different way that we experience the world. Someone with color blindness is not seeing the same colors as someone who has full vision. So if we're talking about colors that we can see, and we're talking about the visible light spectrum, you can see on the slide here, visible light is the colors that we can see. If we don't have color blindness, if we don't have any vision impairment, we can see all those colors on the visible light spectrum. We can see millions of different colors. But there are actually colors outside of the visible light spectrum that we can't see. Those infrared and ultraviolet lights, those are colors that we cannot see. So butterflies can actually see ultraviolet light, and snakes can see infrared light. So that's kind of fun to think about, that these animals can see colors that we can't. So this is sort of what brings us around to synesthesia. We've talked about examples where the way that we physiologically and biologically interpret sensory information is different. So that means if our physiology allowed, if our physiology was different, we could perceive other things that would be undetectable or invisible to other people, which kind of sounds like a superpower, doesn't it? Yeah, so this is what brings us to synesthesia. Synesthesia is sort of a superpower. It allows us to experience sensory information beyond what the normal population does. And earlier I referred to it as a neurological condition, so that's where synesthesia is different. In a normal brain, we're seeing sights, and our brain tells us what we're seeing. But in a synesthetic brain, there's a cross-wiring between those neural pathways. So there's a merging of the senses. The five senses are not separated, but they're linked together. And typically for synesthetes, it's not all 5 senses that are merged together. Usually it's just 2. Sometimes it's 3. But what does that mean? What does it look like to have synesthesia? What's the experience like? So I was going to talk to you about, oops, I think I skipped some slides. I'm not sure where that slide went, but we'll talk about James. James is a man whose sound and taste sense are linked in his brain. So when he hears particular words, he experiences a taste in his mouth. And he says that some words that he hears are pleasant tasting, like he'll taste a jam sandwich when he hears a certain word, but other words are quite unpleasant to hear. So in particular, he reports that when he hears the word or the name Derek, he gets a sensation of tasting earwax in his mouth. Right? Yeah. There's another synesthete I wanted to tell you about. His name is John. John's an interesting case because he's been blind from birth, but he perceives colors and shapes when he hears verbal sequences, like days of the week or numbers. So researchers actually put John into an MRI machine, and they were looking at his brain activity. And when he was read those sequences, like days of the week, they saw a lot of activity in the areas that would normally light up when we are seeing things with our eyes. So John's an interesting case because he shows us that having normal use of our senses is not a prerequisite to having synesthesia. So as we're talking about synesthesia, this might all sound a little strange. And just like super tasters and their aversion for broccoli, some people initially find it difficult to believe that synesthesia has a physiological basis. They might say, oh, synesthetes are just faking it, they have a really overactive imagination. But that's not the case. For synesthetes, experiences like this are completely involuntary and automatic. It's not something that we can control. It's a physiological, neurological difference in the way that we interpret sensory information. It's not something that can be learned or developed. We're born with it. So because we're born with it, a lot of us synesthetes, we don't really realize that synesthesia is a thing. We don't realize that we're different from most of the population. And it isn't really until early adulthood that we find out that we're different than everybody else. So that was certainly my case. The particular type of synesthesia that I've experienced my whole life is called chromathesia. It's very similar to John's in that whenever I hear sound, I see colors and shapes. So in my brain, the visual and hearing senses are intertwined with each other. So everyday sounds like a door closing or the wind blowing through the trees or people talking, it will produce colors and shapes. And these colors and shapes that I'm seeing that are induced by sound are called photisms. And the most beautiful photisms that I see come through music. They're very strong, they're very vivid, very colorful, lots of motion, lots of shimmering lights. So this undoubtedly led to a love for music since I was very little. I asked my parents to give me piano lessons when I was young, and I studied music all my life, and I went on to obtain a degree in music performance. And it's funny, I still don't understand to this day how I made it all the way through university without realizing that I was different, that my synesthetic experience was different than all my friends around me. Until I think I had already graduated from college when I had a friend that pulled me aside and she said, Christina, are you a synesthete? Do you know you're a synesthete? And I said, what are you talking about? I don't understand. So apparently she'd known about synesthesia. She'd researched it or read about it, and I didn't know what it was. And so when it dawned on me that I was different, that I was experiencing something that no one else was, I actually became very heartbroken. I was very sad. And it wasn't because I felt odd or like a freak or anything like that. It was because I realized that all this beauty that I was seeing in the world that was induced by music, no one else was seeing. And so it was as if someone had told you, you're the only person who sees in color. The whole world sees in black and white. And I'm sure that would be heartbreaking to you if that's something you were experiencing. So for me, learning that I was seeing these things when no one else was, it was pretty sad for me. So that's about the time that I started painting music. And in the beginning, I really didn't do very much. I only made 1 or 2 pieces, and that was for a couple reasons. One was that I was a musician full-time, performing and teaching, so that kept up most of my time. But also, I didn't have any artistic training. I didn't really know what I was doing with the art materials, so I just painted a couple pieces. Also, when I would show my paintings to my friends, I would say, look, this is what this song sounds like. Do you see it now? And they would just kind of look at me and say, what are you talking about? I thought that it was like the magic eye, where if I painted it, then you would suddenly see it, but it doesn't really work that way. Like I said, I really didn't paint very much up until about a few years ago, when I encountered some difficult circumstances in my life, some loss, and I was going through a really difficult grieving process. I was having trouble with my emotions, and so as therapy, I would start painting. And it was mostly, I would just put on some music that helped me deal with my emotions, and I was just painting, just for myself. And I took a break from music and kind of spent more time painting and showed some people my work. And of course, like I said, I didn't have any artistic training. So for me, I showed them these works not expecting them to say anything good about them. But instead, a lot of people connected with that work. And it was the kind of connection that was so strong, I think, because if we're talking about seeing invisible things, we can talk about music, seeing music with synesthesia, but we're also talking about seeing those emotions that are a little bit difficult to express with words, like grief and trauma and heartbreak. And so being able to pour both of those things out on the canvas, I think made a real connection between myself and whoever was viewing my art. So at that point, I just went full on and started painting more and more and started showing my work, and that brought me to where I am today. So typically, my artistic process begins with a song that I've heard. And it might just be so stunning that I can't help but paint it. So I will take that song into my studio, either put it on headphones or a speaker, and just loop it. And I'll pull out my canvas and the colors that I'm seeing, and I will just start creating, and I'll just keep looping that song and shaping. The inks, usually I use fluid mediums. I'll shape it with palette knives, or I'll use sponges, or I'll pick up the canvas and use gravity to move it around. But I'll just keep on working and keep on listening until what I'm hearing matches what I see on the canvas. So I'll show you a bit of my work here. I've got the name of the musician and the song that I've painted. So, for example, this is what I see when I hear Bon Iver's 33 God. And there are some themes that show up in my work. First of all, we'll talk about this explosion point. We've got this little point of origin that sort of radiates out. That's something that I see a lot when I listen to music. Another theme that pops up is a light source. So in this one in particular, you can see there's almost always this point of light that might explode out, or it might just sort of undulate and spin around. It might grow and it might shrink. Oops. I think some of these slides are skipping. I'm not sure. Okay, so this song has a very strong percussive element to it. And usually when I hear strong percussion, I see angles, very stark and sharp angles. It can be triangles or squares or rectangles, but that's what I'm depicting in this song. So that's another theme that shows up. Really strong percussion results in strong geometric shapes. Also, circles is something I see a lot in my synesthetic work, and I try really hard to break out of that and paint something that's not a circle, but I'm always seeing circles. And they might be 2D circles that sort of radiate out from each other like ripples on a pond, or they might be a sphere that spins and shrinks and swells. I always see a lot of circles in my work. And I have noticed for musicians that I paint a lot, so this is a song by Radiohead. I paint a lot of Radiohead music. I do see the same themes coming up. So in particular, this piece that I'll compare with another one, we've got some dark circles at the bottom, and there's a movement upwards with these streaks. So here's another song by Radiohead. It's sort of the same composition, even though the song is different, so the colors are different. I still have those circles at the bottom sort of moving upwards. I see a lot of bubbles in my work. You've probably seen those in the past slides, that all these little pinpoints of light that sort of float up like in an effervescent movement. A lot of that stuff. Okay, and I think we skipped a slide that was shown before, but the current body of work that I'm working on, I'm listening to a lot of Max Richter. And he is an artist who did this one composition called Sleep. It's basically an 8-hour lullaby. He gets his audience to come into the auditorium where they have beds set up. And it's designed, you're meant to sleep through this composition. And it's just the most gorgeous, calming, like sedative music. And so what I'm doing here is I'm sort of playing with that idea where I am listening to the music and letting myself fall asleep and trying to wake up before I lose the imagery that I'm seeing. So it's becoming a lot more abstract. So sort of paying an abstraction of what I'm seeing, dwelling in that sort of sleep space. So that's the body of work that I'm working on right now. I wanted to go through some frequently asked questions that I encounter a lot. Obviously, when I tell people I have this neurological condition that is that difference from everybody else, and I'm painting music, they always have a lot of questions. So I'll go through some of those. The first question I get is, okay, so what does green sound like? What does the color green sound like? And so the sort of synesthesia I have is when I hear sound, I see color, but it doesn't work the other way. So if I see the color green, it's not making any kind of sound. So it only goes one way. Whoops, oh my goodness. I better put this down. So I don't know what green sounds like. Another synesthete might be able to answer that question. The next question I get is, can you drive okay? Is it safe for you to drive? And I do get this question a lot, and I think what people are getting at is, when you see the photisms, does it obstruct your field of vision? And the answer is no. I can see perfectly clearly what is really in front of me. The photisms that I get are in my mind's eye. So it's really the way that you would think of a memory or think of an idea. So if I were asked you to envision the face of your best friend, you can see their facial features, you can see their hair, maybe what they're wearing, but they're not physically in front of you. They're not blocking your vision. So that's the same for me. When I hear sound and I see color, it's in my mind's eye. The next question. A lot of people ask me what their voice sounds like. And I'm sad to say that most people's voices are not very unique looking, to me at least. As we've discussed, the most beautiful photisms happen with music. So if someone is singing, that might change it. But normally speaking voices are brown, not a very exciting shade of brown. Every once in a while, I'll get somebody who has a interesting voice or interesting texture to their voice, and that might give a little different color. But on the most part, I always disappoint people when they say, what does my voice sound like? And it's just kind of brown. So I'm also asked if I see auras. I don't see auras. I don't see signs. I don't have any sort of psychic ability. I cannot read your mind. I can only just see the color of your voice, which is beautiful. Another question I get, which is really interesting, and I've actually tried to read up on it, is synesthesia a form of autism? It's not a form of autism, but they are definitely related. The way that synesthetes and people with autism perceive the world, the way that we interpret sensory information, is very similar. Our brains seem to be wired in the same way as far as talking about sensory information. The differences are in the verbal abilities and social abilities, but we do both get very overstimulated easily. We have like attention to detail that is very similar. So at this point, the people who are researching it say no, synesthesia and autism are not the same thing, but they are definitely linked. And in fact, I think the numbers in the general population, people who have synesthesia, the numbers are very low, like maybe 3 or 4% of the general population has synesthesia, whereas if you take the population of people with autism, the synesthesia rates go much higher. So they're definitely linked. The last question I get a lot is synesthesia a blessing or a curse? Like I just said in the last question, having synesthesia, I do get overstimulated very easily. It's difficult for me to process sensory information sometimes, mostly because I feel like I'm getting double the information that most people get. But aside from that, I would never trade synesthesia for anything. Sort of like we were talking about in the beginning, the things that I see when I hear music are just stunning. And I do feel sad that you all can't see it, but that is exactly why I paint. And I would not trade my synesthesia for anything. It's definitely a blessing. So with that said, I've had the privilege of showing you some of my work, and I did want to show you a video that I had. NPR Music asked me to do a time-lapse painting of a couple songs. So the one I'm going to share with you today is, the musician is Moses Sumney, and the name of the song is called Doomed. So I'll show you the video, but before I do that, I'll read the little snippet that I wrote up for them. This is describing what I see when I hear his song. The very first chord of Moses Sumney's Doomed is an oceanic dark blue, paired with a rich vermilion. Moses' voice is interesting to watch. Sometimes it's a saturated charcoal black, sometimes it's a smooth aqua, and that captivating, quick, occasional catch in his voice sounds like an alto sax. It's a moment of sandpaper-textured gold. The soaring, faraway vocal cries in the background are writhing purple. At the apex of the song, light pushes back the dark colors and recedes again as the song draws back into itself. So I'll let you guys watch this video of me painting Moses Sumney's Doomed.
All I want with inverted tongue, from whence does fulfillment come? And I expel from this mortal shell where I die for living up. Am I vital if my heart is I do, and I do? Lovelessness is godlessness. Will you cast me to the wayside? Well, I of high-painted ceilings reveal the covering of a blank sky. Am I vital if not as I do? Am I
You guys are so kind. I'm just gonna say that's even fun for me to watch, and I'm the one who painted it. But yeah, I want to thank you guys for spending part of your day with me and letting me talk to you about synesthesia and show you my work. I am gonna be over here answering some questions. If I didn't cover anything that you have questions about, I'll be over there. But again, I just want to thank you all for coming out. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us here at the Odyssey Festival Center. Please check your festival passport guide for everything you need to know about the many presentations being offered at the Epcot International Festival of the Arts. And please, enjoy the rest of your visit here at Epcot. Thank you.